Hello, twisted humans.
Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting?
Then this is the podcast for you. I'm Alecia.
And I'm Sierra, and this is
Twisted and Uncorked. We are here for another episode of Twisted and Uncorked. Pew, 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 pew. And all of our listeners are gone.
And another round of weird facts.
Exactly. Would not be an episode of Twisted and Uncorked if we didn't start with something to freak you out. So I have two kind of small facts, but they weirded me out enough. Most people have an above average number of arms.
Wait, what? I feel like I missed this. Say it again.
Yeah, no, you heard me correctly. Most people have an above average number of arms.
That's really confusing.
Since some people have no arms or only one arm, the average number of arms a person has is somewhere just below 2. So if you have 2 arms, you have more arms than average.
Wow. That's pretty insane.
I heard it, and then I was like, that makes no fucking sense. And I had to dig into it further, and now it makes sense.
Yeah, that is strange.
But I hope I weirded out all of our listeners just enough.
Yeah, just for a minute.
Yeah, just for a minute. And another weird one, if you fold a regular piece of notebook paper in half 45 times, which is not possible, by the way, it would just be too thick, but it would be thick enough to reach the moon.
I'm sorry. How many times?
45 times. If you folded a regular piece of paper in half 45 times.
You know, I'm definitely going to try that, right?
It's going to get too thick. We'll try on Friday when we do Bitch and Wine. We'll see how many times we can fold a piece of paper in half before it just does not do it anymore.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it would be thick enough to reach the moon.
That's insane.
The power of exponents.
Wow. Okay. I have another bug fact for you. Specifically, an ant fact. I like ants lately. I mean, they're scary, but I like them.
We know. We all know.
There is this specific kind of ant. Okay, this is the scientific name. Cataglyphus ant. Basically, it's like an ant in the desert, a desert ant. Ants measure distance to a specific location by counting their steps.
Oh.
So, like, if an ant is at home and he finds some food, he counts, he gets to the food and then he goes home and remembers that it was like 57 steps to get from his home to food. And then when he goes back to get more food, he counts 57 steps. And the reason that people know this, they figured it out, is they put stilts on the ants after they got home. And so when the ants went back to get the food, they passed right over top of the food because they weren't at the right amount of steps yet because their legs are so much longer now. They have little ant stilts. They passed right over the food, kept going for however many steps they counted, 57 was my example, and looked around like, what the fuck? Where's the food? Like, I know it was here.
Okay, yeah. First of all, how the fuck do you put stilts on an ant?
Oh, it's insane looking.
Yeah.
How can a teeny tiny ant brain count? That's insane.
See, now I understand why I feel bad when I sweep them off my balcony.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel pain when they hit the ground, though, because they're so light.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah. So if something is really light and small, it can fall, like, a crazy distance, and it would be like us jumping off like a chair. So not only are ants super smart, but I don't have to feel bad about it.
They're super resilient, apparently.
They're super resilient. That is insane.
Yeah.
Yes, please put the picture of the tiny ant stilts on the drive because that's hilarious.
I will definitely.
But yeah. Naturally, before we dig into our case, we are going to need some wine.
Oh, yes, especially for this one. Also food, because I don't want to get too drunk, because I know I'm going to be drinking a lot. So if you see me eating a little bit of a burrito, I'm sorry. I apologize.
We are drinking a rosé that Sierra picked for us this week. It's such a cute bottle, by the way.
I don't want to throw it away ever. I love it.
I don't either. The kind of wine. So it's a winery in Washington. It's a Charles Smith wine, and this one in particular is called Band of Roses.
And even the back, it has
Rosé,
the drumsticks.
Yeah, it's so cute. So I like the little description for it. So each of us discovers music in our own way. The same way is true for wine. Inspired by the way music can transform the way we feel, this dry rosé plays a vibrant and floral melody that is sure to get the party started. Just chill the bottle and chill out with your favorite playlist, favorite guest, or both. So I thought it was cute. And then just an interesting fact about rosés, the longer that the grapes sit in contact with their skin, the darker the pink will become. And then the skin is typically removed anywhere between a few hours after fermentation or up to 3 days. So that's kind of where you get that range of really pale pink to a really like pink petal pink, that kind of thing. I don't know if it's because I filled my glass up so full, but this one's like somewhere in the middle with like a little bit of like a coppery tinge.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting because grapes, man. But on the website and when you actually hold up the bottle, it looks a lot pinker, but
yes,
it's interesting. So I'm really excited to try it. I really like rosés. If you guys missed, I think it was like episode 8, I went on a rant about all of the health facts about rosé and the fact that you could make a wine mask out of it. Go listen to that. It's good for your skin. Mm-hmm. Tell me otherwise. Prove me wrong.
I'm also
surprised.
Really excited that I found a Washington wine because usually I can only find California. And also, our case has a little bit to do with Washington State today.
So it's fitting all around.
Yeah, but before we get into the case, we have to say some thank yous.
We're in a good spot here. We've got a couple of new reviews that have come in over the last little while, which is great. Just a reminder, if you guys want like some stickers and a personal thank you card from Sierra and I, send us that screenshot. So thank you so much, you guys. It's really the best way that you can spread the word about the show, short of yelling at people on the street. Telling a friend or leaving a review so that somebody can find us is great. Okay. So thank you.
Most recent one was Megan May 23. Thank you to her. And then we also had one, what was the other one? Nicole.
Mm-hmm. Nicole. Yes. So thank you, both of you guys. We've also gotten a few just 5-star reviews, which is really helpful too if the platform that you listen on doesn't allow comments, but you can click that 5-star. Please still do. It's very, very much appreciated for us.
And special thanks to a new patron.
Yes! So, Haley or Hallie, we're not 100% sure how to say your name. Either way is beautiful, and either way we're thankful for you. So, welcome to the Most Maniacal Club, my friend. If you want to support the show in more ways than just writing a review or shouting at people on the street to listen to Twisted and Uncorked, you can head on over to our Patreon page for hours of bonus content, and we do a few monthly segments each month, so you will never run out of things to listen to. So you guys can go check that out, and it starts at $1. Okay, so we are doing our very next serial killer.
Yay! Finally.
Any of you that have been listening since the beginning, you know that it's been approximately 17 episodes since our last serial killer. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was our episode 1 with Sierra and I. So if you're starting backwards for Reddit, whatever reason, back it up. You've missed lots of gold.
Yes, for sure.
And this next serial killer that we are doing, I know Sierra is very excited to cover because she started this research before she joined me, so she is very excited.
Favorite evil nightmarish human to study.
Yeah. And shamelessly talk about at dinner parties where everybody's like, you're weird.
Yeah, this is the stuff of nightmares.
Yes, truthfully. So we are covering Israel Keys.
Ugh.
I know. As soon as every time I say
name.
Israel Keys, I get goosebumps. I'm like, ugh. Like, he's just, like, skin crawly to the next level. So,
Also,
we'll go.
sorry, just a quick little anecdote.
Yeah, of course.
His looks reminds me of my sister's ex-boyfriend. Like, who I also hate.
So makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I don't think he stood a chance when your sister was dating him, if he
Well,
looked
I didn't-
remotely like Israel Keys.
My sister dated him before the police knew of Israel Keys.
Oh, okay. So Israel
yeah.
Keys wasn't a creep yet in your
Yes.
mind. Okay.
Yes.
Fair. Wow.
But looking
All right.
back, I'm like, holy shit. He
Yeah,
looks
looking back, you're
Israel
like, ooh,
Keys. And I sent the
that's
picture.
yucky.
I sent the picture to my sister, and I was like, doesn't this look like
So-and-so?
him? And she was like, ew, no. And I was like, yes, he does. You're lying.
Does your
He
sister know?
does.
Did your sister know who Israel Keys was?
No, I didn't even tell her it was the
Okay.
serial killer. I literally just sent a picture and said, doesn't this guy look like the guy?
I was
She's
like,
like, no.
naturally, when you tell somebody that your boyfriend looks like a serial killer, their natural instinct is going to be like, no, gross, doesn't look anything like him.
That's true.
Yes,
it's
yes,
an
it does.
She hates him. I don't know if she was thinking Israel Keys was better looking than her boyfriend or her ex-boyfriend or what, but she did not agree, so whatever.
Yikes. So maybe it's for the best. Okay. Every sip is getting better. So, arguably, I would say Israel Keys is one of the most terrifying serial killers. He's interesting and terrifying because even with all that we know about him, there's still so many answers that we will never know, and so many potential cases over the years of people that have gone missing or unsolved murders that have his signatures, or he was in the area at the time based on that little roadmap of where Israel Keys was at what time. People have speculated wildly over the years. It's possible that some of those are connected to him, or it's possible that they're not related at all, but that kind of unknowing and unofficial way that he has left us is just eerie all around. So
Yes.
We'll never quite know every little bit about him. There are a lot of sources that give info about Israel Keys as a person, but the primary chunk of our research was taken from Maureen Callahan's book called American Predator and from the FBI website. All right, so Israel Keys was born on, where did Sierra go? I had my notes. She's like, I'm still here. I just couldn't see your little box.
Here I am. Hi.
Hi, I'm here. Israel Keys was born on January 7th, 1978, in a tiny town called Cove in Utah. Two parents, Heidi and John Jeffrey, who went by Jeff. Makes sense. Heidi and Jeff were both Mormons living in Los Angeles when they met as teenagers, and were both seemingly normal people. But again, when was that the last time you've heard that? Mm-hmm. They got married at the ages of 21 and 22, and they moved from Utah shortly after because Heidi wanted to raise kids out in nature, which respect, because if you know Sierra and I, you know that we are huge hippies.
Yes, these are my kind of people.
Well, the normalness soon started to wear off, and they became the kind of hippies that give the hippies a bad rap. So we don't associate with these hippies.
Not these ones.
Heidi and Jeff started having babies right away. They wasted no time into their marriage, but they did it the old-fashioned way. This was the 1970s, so things were changing in the U.S., and the government was starting to get a little bit more involved in everyone's day-to-day life. Case in point, Sierra and I will have a conversation, and something will pop up on one of our phones right after that. So, I mean, this was well before the big brotheriness that we're used to dealing with.
But this is when it started.
Yeah, this is the pin. In the history books, this is what it started.
Right, exactly.
And that didn't sit well with the Keyses, obviously, because they like that hippie, free spirit, scary way of life.
Scary.
Their first two children that they had were Israel's older sister and Israel Keyes himself. Both were born in the house, delivered from Heidi into Jeff's hands, and were never taken to a hospital or a doctor, hence what we mean by the old-fashioned way.
Mm-hmm.
None of their kids ever had social security numbers, immunizations, or even went to school.
That is way too far into hippie culture. Okay.
Yes. It's like borderlining culty at this point.
Mm-hmm, already.
Yeah, we're 2 paragraphs in, guys. Heidi and Jeff didn't believe in all of the rules that the government had and quickly became paranoid about others judging them and the possibility that the police would be called for them not conforming to the new way of society. So they moved out of their Utah home and bought a 160-acre plot of land in Washington State. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, we didn't cheers to episode 18. Cheers to episode 18, man. Midway cheers is okay.
It's fine.
Where no neighbors would be around. So always a good scene for any story.
Mm-hmm. Any culty hippies.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the culty hippie handbook. It's like,
yes.
Have children. Don't register them as children. Move to a 168-acre plot. At first, they were literally just living in the woods on top of this mountain where their land was, which sounds beautiful in hindsight, but not exactly the place to raise children.
Yeah, also, it was literally in the woods. There was no house.
Yeah.
Jesus.
There is this thing called shelter being one of the basic human needs for a reason.
Right. You have to survive with shelter. God.
Exactly. But the parents did eventually rent a small cabin to stay in while Jeff was building the home on their land. So I guess they learned that
quickly,
being straight out in the woods with 2 children was not ideal.
Yeah. 2 for now.
Yeah, right? 2 of many. The cabin wasn't much of a home either. It had no electricity or heat or plumbing, but it was better than literally living out in the elements, like Sierra said. The home Jeff was building would also take a while, considering that he was building it all alone, by hand, and like true hippie nature, literally cutting down trees on the land to use as the wood in the building process.
That is so insane to me. Like, Amish culture, they build their own homes by hand with trees that they cut, but they also get the entire community to help them.
Yeah.
So, like,
not just one man.
Yeah,
to
one
tree
man.
ratio.
You can't ask one friend to help you. How paranoid are you? Goodness.
So, like we said, this was the first 2 of many children that Heidi and Jeff had together. They had a total of 10 kids.
Jesus.
And at this point, they were still living in this tiny cabin that was so crowded that Israel and the older kids would sleep outside in a tent at night. So I imagine it was split like 5 and 5. Like,
yeah,
not enough room.
Like a 1 bedroom for 5 people and a 1 tent for 5 people.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It sounds cozy. In the wintertime, it would get way too cold, so they spend time with Jeff's parents in California and sleep there, which is better than being in a tent in the elements in the wintertime.
Yeah, that's nice.
And Heidi and Jeff thought that their children more as assets than children. Their children were born simply to help them survive, so they needed a lot of them.
That's so super old school thinking. That's like 16th century thinking. Like, what is that?
Yeah. Once they were of working age, where they were actually able to help out, the children became free sources of labor for the family.
And now it's a cult.
Yeah, officially. The children didn't have many friends. They weren't allowed to watch TV or listen to the radio, because again, that paranoid mindset. And they never really went anywhere except for church, and they were homeschooled, so that was literally their only means of leaving.
If you listen to That's So Fucked Up, shout out to That's So Fucked Up, they have bingo cards that they play for each episode. I guarantee you that you could get cult bingo, like, already. This is insane.
Yeah, cult bingo.
And this is just family.
Did we win, though? Who won in this situation?
Who knows?
Since they also didn't have many clothing, since the family didn't leave the house much, and everything was built and provided by their family alone. So they all wore hand-me-down clothing, which was normally fine. But for this family, it was a bit extreme. Israel actually had a permanent disfigurement of his toes because the shoes that he wore as a child were always too small.
That's insane. Like, hand-me-downs are my favorite. You know, I like the environment. Reuse, recycle. Children grow.
There are basic things that you need to provide for kids.
Also, if you're not going anywhere anyway, don't make him wear shoes. God.
Yeah. If you can't afford shoes and you're not going anywhere, go barefoot rather than letting your poor child's toes become disfigured.
Well, it's Israel Keys. It's not a poor child. Fuck him. But
yeah, but he could have been a fucking saint had he not had disfigured toes, Sierra.
I don't know about that, but I get it.
No, definitely from the womb evil, but I'm just saying there might have been a little bit of a buffer zone had he had good shoes as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only friends that the children actually had were ones that they made at church because, like we said, that was the only time they left was to go to church. So Heidi and Jeff were both born Mormon when they met, but they actually ended up switching religions when they moved to this property in Washington. Their new church was called the Ark, and it was a militia-based white supremacist anti-Semitic church. So solid all around.
So if the disfigured toes didn't fuck Israel up, this probably did. Don't send your children to this church.
There's no way to know which one it was. Israel befriended two brothers from the church named Shebby and Shane. So they were living a life that was similar to what Israel was living. They had 6 siblings. They lived off the grid on a big piece of land. The main difference is that the boys' families weren't living this way because they were hippies that didn't want to conform to capitalism. They were living this way because they were preparing for a race war.
Because they were psychotic. Jesus. Okay.
So the Keyses have clearly found their people.
Uh-huh.
In the Ark. They were just paranoid criminals who illegally stole, sold, and bought guns off the black market. So these are the people you want to associate with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I'm friends with Sierra. I could be friends with these people.
Oh, God.
While Jeff was away working odd jobs for money and building their home still on this 160-acre property, Israel, being the oldest son, became the man of the house. All the children worked farming and cleaning, but Israel learned how to cook for his siblings. He babysat them. This is kind of wholesome.
I know.
And he even learned to braid his sister's hair.
Which is so cute. Like, he maybe could have been something better than what he was, which was an evil fucking monster. But who knows?
Heidi loved her life and assumed that her children must have too. She was proud of herself for not participating in capitalism and government brainwashing like the rest of the world was.
Quote unquote.
The children were not happy, though. They knew this wasn't a normal way for kids to grow up, and they blamed their parents for depriving them of a normal childhood and proper shoes.
Yes.
Now that Israel had friends who had guns and who had taught him how to get away with stealing guns, he started to act like what he thought a normal kid might act like given the circumstances that he was in. For fun, he would go into the woods with his friends and his siblings and shoot guns or start fires. One time when he was 12, he wanted to see what it would be like to shoot a living thing, so he killed a cat. I already knew this part was coming because Sierra warned me that this would be in my part, and she felt really bad about it because I'm me, but I'm just going to read it like I am talking about nothing. So he killed a cat. In his own words, Israel said, "I took a piece of parachute cord and tied, in parentheses, the cat to the tree, and I shot the cat in the stomach, and it ran around the tree. And it, the cat, crashed into the tree and started vomiting. For me, I didn't really react. I actually kind of laughed a little bit because of the way that it was running around the tree. But I looked at the kid who was my age, and he was throwing up. Kind of traumatized, I think. So a normal reaction to watching an animal suffer."
So, 12 years old, fires, killing animals. He is obviously escalating through the McDonald triad, he is already a fucking psychopath.
Because, like he said, he looked and saw a normal reaction, but he was not feeling this way, so.
So, this is where I don't know if the shoes and the church really is what made him a psychopath. I think he was just a psychopath.
Yeah. We can go on the nature versus nurture route all day long, but we know that
it's a little of both.
It's never been nature versus nurture. It's always both. Exactly. Mm-hmm. When Jeff had finally finished building the home on their property, the whole family moved in and was happy to have a generator, a working kitchen, electricity that ran on propane, but Israel didn't want to live with his family anymore. He was 15 and decided to build his own home on the property. So it was just a tiny cabin with no electricity, and he was living alone, but he did manage to finish it in 1 year.
Which is insane. Like,
yeah, I mean, it took his dad, I mean, mind you, it was a much larger scale.
Right. But 15 years old, and he was like, I got this shit. Fuck you, Dad.
Yeah, that's actually kind of impressive.
Yeah.
He needed complete quiet to be able to hunt deer and other animals, so he needed to be alone. And this is like 160 acres, reminding you guys, it's not just like he's like right next door to his family. In the past, he had learned to hunt with his dad and his friends as a way to have food to eat. But this wasn't really a necessity anymore. Now he was hunting because he felt like he needed to prove to himself that he could and that he was the best at it. Living alone didn't really last long. Israel was arrested for shoplifting in town, and since he was still a minor, his mother had to come and pick him up. He was only sentenced with community service for this incident, but it started to change the way that Israel thought about everything. His parents were extremely upset by the charge of stealing because it is a sin in the eyes of God. So, I mean, in this realm, they have a normal way of thinking.
Right.
And on top of shoplifting, they found all of Israel's guns that he had stolen and had been keeping in his own little house. So they forced him to move back in with him. Some people believe that this was a turning point for Israel. He thought his parents were hypocrites because hunting without a license and during non-hunting seasons was also illegal, but his parents allowed and even encouraged him to do that. He also mentioned to his mother at the time that he didn't want to live his whole life the way that she and his dad had lived. He didn't want to live intense. He wanted a normal life, and he was mad that she didn't allow or even consider that this wasn't what he and his siblings wanted, but it was what her and Jeff wanted. Mm-hmm. It seemed that from here on out, Israel was going to purposely rebel against his parents behind their backs as a sort of fuck you move with them.
Yes. Like, oh my gosh. Reading the book, it was like, this was it. This was what was like, oh, you thought I was bad before? Watch this shit.
Yeah. You're going to take away the little bit of freedom I've created for myself? Mm-hmm. Fuck you, then.
Forever.
Heidi and Jeff reported that their children started to act out around this time as well. And those actions of Israel and others caused them to think that it wasn't a good place for them to live anymore. So he had kind of realized this, and now his siblings were starting to as well. Mm-hmm. By now, they had removed themselves from the white supremacist church, supposedly because of what they heard had happened at Waco. So now they need to find a new place to belong. The Keys family moved to Oregon next. They all lived in tents while Israel helped. Fuck's sakes. We're back at square one.
Forever. You're forever at square one.
Oh,
God.
This is exhausting, and I'm just reading it.
Yes.
Ugh. And helped Jeff build a house on the property. In Oregon, this is where Israel claims that he first hurt any person. He says that he lured a teenage girl away from her group of friends when she was too big, and he didn't know her name, but she had sandy blonde hair. He claims that he intended to rape, then kill her, but after the sexual assault, he couldn't bring himself to go through with the murder, so instead he let her go. He said he wasn't violent enough to kill her. It seemed like a failure for him, though, and after that moment, he said that he would never let another victim live. He would master the violence and be able to kill the next victim the next time. Which is like, it's not mastering anything.
Yeah,
you just showed that you're a little bit of a human.
Yeah, no.
Ugh!
No.
Can you imagine being
So many
this
chills
girl?
in this episode.
I know. I have goosebumps right now. No one has ever come forward claiming that they were his first victim, but people often talk about their abusers in the 90s. So it is possible that this is a true story. He didn't kill that person.
Or it's possible that he did kill her and he denied it. Like, I'm going to get into this eventually, but Israel eventually has a kid. And so he said, I would never hurt a kid. But I'm thinking he did hurt this kid. And after having a kid of his own, he felt guilty and was like, I'm going to pretend I didn't kill her.
Possible.
It's Israel.
I think anything is possible. He is just an enigma. Once the house in Oregon was finally built, they sold it and moved again to New York. They
Those poor kids.
Yeah, right? And, like, how much money are they making off of, like, cutting down trees and building houses?
Only enough to buy the next plot of land,
I
apparently.
guess so, yeah. They stayed for about a year in New York, intense, while they built another little home.
Of
Then,
course.
again, repeated this process and moved to Maine. The New York property was put in Israel's name, but they expected him to move with them. Israel was 20 years old at this point, tired of his family using him as an asset and forcing him to move around. He wrote in a journal that his parents were, he called it first, were cult shopping with each of these moves. They would find a new little place to live and a new little religion or way of life to follow every time, but never the way that the majority of the world was living. First, they forced Mormonism on him, then Christianity, then crazy white people with guns, his words, and now they were living in Maine, and they were among the Amish, back to no electricity.
At least they have people to help them build their houses now, though.
I know. Israel didn't want to leave his siblings, so there's that little bit of a heart in him, like he's freaking learning how to braid hair, but he couldn't take it anymore, so he stayed at his New York property, out in the woods, while he studied to get his GED and live a normal life. Once he got his GED, he sweet-talked his way into the army, which seems really strange considering that he didn't have a social security number or even a registered birth certificate. But this wasn't the 70s anymore. It was 1998.
Yeah, the only explanation I could come up with that is that in 1998 the military was hurting for people to join, like nobody was joining, so they were like, okay, I don't care, just join,
Yeah,
like,
so they kind of looked the other way,
right.
that he was like an illegal human.
Right.
He was eventually stationed in Fort Hood, Texas, Egypt, and Fort Lewis, Washington. While in the military, he admitted to hiring sex workers to sleep with, but he didn't admit to committing any crimes during that time. That doesn't mean he didn't necessarily do it. We know how serial killers are, that narcissistic quality. They like to give you just enough, but keep a lot close to home. So
Yeah.
It just means that we don't know about it. He did have a vehicle. Wow. He did have some rental vehicles throughout his time in the military, which we know was kind of his MO.
Yes. If you know anything about Israel Keys, you know that.
Yes. Israel eventually told police that he traveled a lot to be able to get away with murder. He wouldn't just take people right by his home. He would travel to one place, rent a car, drive to another place, kill somebody, take their car to travel to another place, then go back home. It was all meticulously planned so that he never got caught, and he became scary good at it, which is where that
Yes.
allure comes from when it comes to Israel Keys, is there's so much that we do not know. From this point forward, we're going to list off a lot of the travels that Israel Keys took while we talk about how his life kind of played out at the same time. Just keep them in mind whenever you hear about a missing persons case, a cold case, because no one ever really knows where all of his victims are.
Yeah, this could be
And like I said, there's potentially a lot of cases that are tied to him that we don't even know about.
Yes.
So just kind of keep these dates and where he is in the back of your mind.
if they remind you of a cold case, let us know. We want to hear about it.
In September of 1999, he rented a car out in Lakewood, Washington. In November of 1999, just a couple months later, he rented a vehicle on 2 separate occasions out of Fort Lewis, Washington as well. And cheers to Washington.
Oh, God. We can't do this anymore. I will be dead.
And in January of 2000, he rented a vehicle out of Spokane, Washington, and Lakewood, Washington. So those were his travels while he was in the military. So we don't know what the fuck he was doing.
We don't know where he went, but we know he had cars.
Israel said that he liked being in the army. He liked the structure of all of it. He never made friends because he didn't know how to talk to people his age, since he had no knowledge of pop culture or what was really going on in the world around him, given his upbringing.
Right.
But I can imagine that he really liked that structure because he didn't have that. It was just
exactly.
Get up, move, get up, move, get up, move. So he kind of probably really enjoyed that routine. And it seemed he enjoyed military life because of everything about his personal life needed to be controlled. I think this is where his mental state really comes into play. He tried doing a lot of drugs but didn't like it because it made him feel out of control. He liked drinking alcohol because he once got a DUI in the army, but was mad at himself for getting out of control. So he learned to drink the amount needed to have a good buzz, but remain completely in control of his actions. So basically, God, what everybody should do when they drink, but okay.
Right. He's just
we've all learned everything. What our limit is, and then to dial it back. He lied a lot too, to himself and to others, which is a classic serial killer trait as well. Psychopath. It's like there was a voice in his head, some sort of conscience telling him that certain things about his life were wrong or or not okay in the eyes of God, so that he couldn't say those things to anybody. But guys, God is always watching. Just saying. If that's what you're worried about, he's always watching. He didn't have enough control not to do them. He just controlled the situations around them and the people around him so that no one else would ever know. Yeah. So it's clear at this point that he's recognized that something is awry.
Something's wrong, and he's I'll just control it. It's fine. Yeah, I'm going to control everything.
Dial it back, guys. Dial it back. That's not a possibility. And that is the scary thing about psychopaths, is that they're usually aware that what they're doing is wrong. In the case of Ed Kemper, he purposefully wanted to get caught to be stopped. Israel Keys was the complete opposite. He was doing everything that he could do to not get caught.
Mm-hmm. And he loved it.
Yes. Also, while in the military, on top of hiring sex workers often, he actually had 2 relationships going on at the same time. Like, ooh, scandalous.
For sure.
One of his relationships was ongoing with a girl back in Washington State. Cheers, drink. Washington State. Drink! He met her when he was 18 and actually really liked her. Ever since then, he had maintained a long-distance relationship with her, where they talked about and dreamed about getting married one day, losing their virginities together. Israel wasn't a virgin, though, obviously.
Yeah, sex workers.
But
hello.
Yeah. Just because it was paid for doesn't mean it's not happening. But he obviously told her that he was, and that he was saving himself for marriage, as she was. Once Israel was stationed at a military base in Washington State.
Okay, listen, you guys.
You did this!
If you guys aren't playing along with us by now, drink every time we say Washington State, okay? You're gonna die, but it'll be fun.
It'll be fun. It'll make this easier to deal with. Once Israel was stationed at a military base in Washington State, their relationship was less long distance, but still very uninvolved. By this time, he had proposed to her, but had gave his fiancée many excuses for why they couldn't talk or why she couldn't meet his military friends. Red flags all around, girl.
Oh, yes.
She seemed to try and overlook these red flags and hoped that they would soon be married and everything would be normal. Ladies that are out there dating, don't ever ignore the red flags. Mm-mm. As 2 married women, we can tell you to not ignore the red flags.
Yeah, we've been there. We've done that. Okay, don't fucking do it.
It's not worth it.
No.
You might be dating Israel Keys. There might be a bigger issue at hand here. Yeah, I know. That's a horrifying thought. He had also started dating an older woman named Tammy. that he met online. She was 10 years older than Israel. They had met in 2000, so he was 22 and Tammy was 32. Get it, girl. But not with Israel keys.
Right.
Tammy also had an 8-year-old son from a previous relationship, and the two got along very quickly. Israel felt somewhat normal around her because she too had had a rough childhood like him. She grew up without electricity, without plumbing like he had. She had a violent childhood and was eventually passed around from one foster home to another, moving around a lot like he had. But unlike Israel, she used her past as a way to motivate her future, so she turned it into something positive. She built a good life for herself, and even though Israel could be honest and unashamed of his past with her, he never actually mentioned the part of his life that consisted of going to a white supremacist church.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, but also I would never go, so
No,
anyway.
Exactly.
I mean, he was a child. I can't blame that on him.
Yeah, he
His
didn't have a
parents did
choice.
that. Yeah.
If he was looking to have a real, honest relationship, he could be like, look, Tammy, this is a part of what I was dragged into with my family.
And I hated it.
I hated it. I don't
Right.
live with my family anymore. I've broken off to have my own life. I love what we have. He could have just been fucking honest.
Yeah, but he won't because he's very, very controlling.
And she never noticed any racist tendencies in the time that she spent with him. So
That's good. At least he didn't, live it out. You know what I mean?
yeah. After only 8 weeks of spending nearly every day together, Tammy was pregnant.
No,
and it was
girl.
Israel's baby.
No. You're having a baby with the fucking devil. Jesus.
Clearly. Yeah. When she first told him about it, he asked her to get an abortion because he wasn't ready for being a father. After hearing Tammy say that she was going to keep the baby with or without his help, after thinking on it some more, Israel had a change of heart. Maybe not heart. I don't know if he has one of those.
No, he
but
doesn't.
He changed his mind.
Yeah.
He called off his engagement with his fiance that he was with on the side of Tammy, and got back together with Tammy. He thought about having a baby with Tammy would be easy way to put some control or stability into his life, which again, babies fix nothing, people. Again.
They really don't.
And also that it would really piss off his parents for him to have a child that was part black and part Native American, as Tammy's ethnicity was. So back to that FU rebellion that we were talking about
I think that's
earlier.
the only reason he went through with this. He was like, ooh, you know how mad my parents are going to be if my child is black and Native American? They were once white supremacists. They're going to be
not
pissed.
being a part of this child's life would not have made a difference. Tammy gave him that choice, exactly what we said she should do.
Well, he was a part for a little while.
Yeah. But I just
then
mean,
he was fucking selfish again, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I just mean, fucking just leave them alone. Mm-hmm. Actually, he did almost everything in the house, the cooking, the cleaning, but not because he was a good man wanting to help out his soon-to-be baby mama, but because he needed to be in control.
Yeah.
Tammy could tell that's what it was, but she let him do it anyway. He would let himself lose control a bit and would tell Tammy when he was drunk that he was a bad person with a black heart. The same year, and possibly the reason for confessing that he was a bad man with a black heart, Israel later tells police that he had committed his first homicide. It was right after he had gotten out of the military. He got out in July of 2001, and he says that the reason he started hunting and killing people was because the reservation that he had lived on was boring.
He was bored.
Sorry, what?
That reminds me of Robert Hansen, and I want to...
So much like Robert Hansen. Ugh. Yeah, he's just another level.
He's like, I'm kind of bored right now.
I'm just gonna go hunt some people. You know what I do when I'm bored? I eat.
Same.
Like Israel's other girlfriends, Tammy avoided these red flags too, and thought that Israel's drunken sadness was related to the bad childhood that he had. It wasn't until he told her about Chevy and Shane, when their names popped up on a TV, that she started to question how bad he really was. And his childhood, for that matter. The two were arrested for running from and shooting at the police, and one of them for also murdering a family of 3, including an 8-year-old little girl.
Jesus.
When the TV show aired, Israel and Tammy watched, and Israel mentioned that he grew up with those boys. Tammy had a million questions, but Israel didn't want to talk about it, so she let it go.
I would have a million fucking questions as well.
I would too, and I would not fucking let it go.
Right.
In April of 2002, Israel had gotten a hotel at the Hong Kong Inn in Port Angeles, Washington. Drink!
Jesus, this is going to be bad.
He and Tammy were doing well, so maybe this was a simple vacation type stay. But with the review saying that there tends to be cigarette smells and cockroaches in the room, and at $24 a night, I'm going to assume that it was something more sinister happening at this time. And Israel didn't admit to anything specific at this hotel, though. So we're just going to assume.
I don't know, Tammy, but I don't think she'd want to stay at a cigarette-smelling, cockroach-infested hotel as, like, a honeymoon type thing, so...
Yeah, Sierra knows she's been to murder hotels.
I have said.
But again, guys, you gotta send us in your listener stories to unlock Sierra's next crazy story.
You want to unlock my memories? You gotta send us a story.
It's like levels in a video game. It's like, send us 8 listener stories and unlock Sierra's level 1. 1 and 2 have already been released, guys. We're looking for 3 and 4 at this point.
I have too many. I have more stories than I realized, and it's
Sierra is maybe the coolest person any of us know.
I don't think it's cool. I feel like I maybe have the worst luck of any person I know.
I grew up in a haunted house. She's encountered with aliens.
Aliens, break-ins, murderers, multiple.
Did you say break-ins?
Break-ins.
Oh, I thought you said break-ins.
What is a break-in?
My family calls raccoons rake-ins. So
that sounds like something
I was
Canadians
like, what do any of these stories have to do with raccoons?
Also Israel.
No, actually, raccoons are real cute. I don't want to drag him down with trash pandas.
You're right. No. He's worse than a trash panda.
Raccoons deserve better than that, Sierra.
You're right.
And 2 weeks later, his dad unfortunately passed away.
Oh,
his father's death gave him a reason to travel to Maine for the funeral. And you know what Israel Keys does when he travels? Mm-hmm. This particular travel is important because we know at some point Israel started setting up kill kits all over America. So
trigger
and I will in
goosebumps again. Anyway.
Yeah. Real goosebumps. Mm-hmm. The number of kill kits and locations of them are still unknown. So if you find something that you suspect could be one of Israel Keys' kill kits, you're supposed to call the FBI, send them the location information. The FBI to the FBI tips email account, and we will link all of that in the show notes because I am sure that hunters and campers and people just like hiking have uncovered these over the years. And it is as cool as it is to find something like this. I would just urge you guys to go through the correct means because it could help link some of these unsolved cases or...
Right. What if there's something in there that was used in a crime?
Yeah. So it could be hugely valuable in ways that we don't even know about. But basically these kill kits were hidden. There's 5-gallon buckets that you would typically get from Home Depot, like those orange paint buckets that you see. And they're filled with weapons and tools that can be used to murder somebody, clean up the murder, etc. So really just terrifying. I get nauseous when I see pictures of these. Yeah. So some things that Israel Keys mentioned is that something that he had in his kill kits typically were zip ties, guns with silencers and bullets, duct tape, Drano to speed up the decomp process, things like that. So in August of 2003, Israel had stayed at a hotel called Portside Inn in Port Angeles, Washington. In August of 2003, Israel stayed at a hotel called Portside Inn in Port Angeles, Washington. And again, at the same place in October of that year. But by this time, Israel and Tammy were beginning to have some issues in their relationship. He eventually started seeing another woman because he's a piece of shit. So it's not unlikely that these stays were more for infidelity than for killing. But either way, he's a piece of shit. But it's Israel Keys, so we'll probably never know. Israel and his family lived together in Washington State. Israel says he committed 2 separate murders during this time. 2 murders is
Quote,
what
unquote.
he called it. But it was actually 3 people.
Yeah.
I love you. I do that a lot. Like, even when I read, like, any story, I do that a lot. And you always go quote, unquote. And I've never noticed it until now. And I appreciate you for that.
Yes, of course.
Guys, Sierra is just the best co-host.
Oh.
She tells you when I'm making air quotes. The first was his first ever. To record. We're still not sure. Right. So the second was a couple, 2 people, that he had counted as 1 murder, which is so fucking heartless.
Psychopath.
The other, other than saying that he often hunted his victims in wooded areas like walking trails and parks, Israel didn't give any other information about who these 3 people might have been. So that's like, I just got chills again.
What a man.
In 2004, he left Tammy. She had developed cancer and wasn't really participating in the home life, which is very much understandable when you develop an illness.
You have fucking cancer? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, you can't participate.
Bless you.
Sorry, thank you. So he really... This is where I have no respect for serial keys, but I knew this about his past. And
I get it, but also you decided to have a life with that person, so you don't get to choose to leave her when she's sick. I know you didn't technically marry her, but when you decide to live with her and live off of her, the in sickness and in health thing is implied.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a wedding vow for a reason, guys. Yeah, you are
marriage
bound to that
certificate or
person.
not, you should fucking be there.
So this is another reason that Israel Keys is a piece of shit.
Yes.
He was basically a single father and decided that he didn't want his daughter to be raised this way. So he and his daughter moved out and he began dating again. Like Tammy didn't fucking exist. So like not cool. Like that's still her mom. He met a woman named Kimberly who was even older than Tammy, so like boys got mommy issues. I'm not really sure.
For real.
And who was wealthy, so clearly he's after something else.
Gold digger?
Him and his family.
What?
Yeah, he's got mommy issues and he's a gold digger and he's a piece of shit. So is everybody taking notes? Just want to make sure. Also, in 2004, in February, Israel rented a car in Salt Lake City, Utah. Maybe him and Ted Bundy, they traded addresses back in the day.
Yes.
Yeah, back in the day. He's like, hey, I got a car in Salt Lake City, Utah. He put 840 kilometers on the vehicle and was not given permission to take it out of the state. But... it's Israel Keys again, so when did he follow rules?
Right, he doesn't need permission. He's gonna go where he fucking wants to go.
Exactly, but that's a lot of fucking kilometers. Like, that's more kilometers than some people put on in a year. But it's Israel Keys, so again, he doesn't really follow the rules. And in October of that year, he took a trip to New Hampshire on a plane. And once he was there, he rented another vehicle in Manchester and drove 2,808 kilometers. Like,
that's
what?
A fucking lot.
That is
even
so
in miles.
much.
That's a fucking lot.
That is so much. So I've had my car for like 9 years, and I don't even put that on in a year. So I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, that's like that's over 1,000 miles, and in America, I mean, we do a lot of driving because America is crazy. Anyway, there's so much devastation to our
insane
environment. But anyway.
Because of Israel keys?
I mean, no, just because fucking America. But 3,000 miles in a month is normal in America. That was 1,000
Are you
miles.
kidding?
That was over 1,000 miles in like a couple days. Yeah, 3,000 miles a month, I believe, is what the quote unquote normal is for America.
What? He went canoeing in Washington State. I didn't get to drink Washington State. Oh, no, I missed that. I'm just going to repeat that sentence. Mm-hmm. In March of 2005, Israel went canoeing on 2 separate occasions in Washington State. Sierra's already drinking. Mm-hmm. On one occasion, he was spotted camping, and on another, he was spotted parked in his truck near Hoko River in Northwest Washington.
He's just all over Washington.
Sorry, hopefully it didn't echo. I pulled my glass away quickly as soon as I realized. And in early April of that same year, he purchased a boat in Port Angeles, Washington. That's 3 drinks in one sentence if nobody's paying attention.
Yeah, seriously. Also, boats make for easier disposal of bodies, I'm sure.
Truth. So, he switched it up from his usual car renting to rent a boat. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, Sierra, are you speaking from experience?
I wish I had a boat. Also, I don't think there's any water near me.
Google the nearest body of water. In October of 2005, Israel went on another trip. He went from Los Angeles, California to El Salvador and rented a vehicle in Belize. In December,
I want to go to Belize so fucking bad.
I do too.
Can I say that? Yeah.
I do too. In April of 2006, he rented a boat in Victoria, BC. Also got a hotel there at the Travelers Inn. So for those of you guys that don't know, that's actually where I was born and grew up, is in Victoria. In May, he took a flight to San Diego and spent 5 days there before flying back. Thank God he did not spend a lot of time in Victoria. In June, he made another hotel reservation in Port Angeles, Washington. Cheers, Washington. At a place called the Red Lion. About a week later, he was down in Ridgefield, Washington.
Jesus, stay out of Washington.
And about a week later, he was down in Ridgefield, Washington to pick up some things for work. In September of 2006, he took a flight to Alaska for 6 days where he probably met up with his good pal Robert Hansen to hunt some people, but we don't know. Later in October, he took a flight to San Diego, and on this trip, he also crossed the border by foot from Tijuana, Mexico, back from San Diego, and he got a hotel at the Quality Inn Suites there. And in November, he took a flight and spent 5 days in Alaska again. In February of 2007, he spent 3 days in Las Vegas after taking a flight there. So for our listeners, we're putting a lot of information at you, and I think Sarah was about to say the exact same thing.
Yes.
So on our blog posts on our website that we typically do with photos and explanations of things, we'll also post his timeline.
Yes.
Of where he was at what time.
So much.
Just so if anybody wants to reference it further, or they're like, hey, like that sounds familiar and this happened in my town at this time, you can always reference it that way too. Because I know we're throwing a lot of dates and locations at you guys. During this time between 2004 and 2007, there were 2 other murders that Israel had admitted to, not necessarily the only that he committed, but what he admitted to. He hasn't given much information about who these people were. If there were any more couples that he only grouped as one fucking person, apparently.
Right.
And if they lived in the state or state that he traveled to. Or where they could be found.
Yeah, so, like, he's super fucking vague.
He's like, ridiculous. I maybe killed somebody in this year at this time. He said that the couples from earlier were buried in a valley, and that he also had at least one of his victims that was put out in Crescent Lake in Washington. George Washington, tied to an anchor, which is so fucked up. So sometime during all of those travelers, or even at home in Alaska, at least 2 people were killed by Israel Keyes that we know of. And the people that he necessarily killed, we don't know of, because he's just saying he's committed murders.
Right.
The only thing that we know is that likely neither of the victims that he's talking about was Canadian. Israel told police when he was talking about his victims that Canadians don't count as victims. What the fuck does that mean?
This is his fucking anti-Semitic fucking white supremacist shit.
What does that mean?
He only counted white Americans as victims. He was a fucking psycho.
So if he ever killed somebody who was Canadian, he likely wouldn't have admitted to it during that period of time that he was renting a boat in Victoria. Awesome. My homeland. He also you can also assume from his racism that was ingrained in him at a young age that he assumed people of color and Native Americans also did not count, even though his baby mama and child were of minority group races as well. So it seemed only the people that he considered to be victims were white Americans.
Yeah.
In 2007, Israel's girlfriend Kimberly, that she forgot because he likes to bounce around women, the woman that he left Tammy for, was moving to Anchorage, Alaska. And she asked Israel to move with her. Tammy, still in love with Israel, used their daughter as leverage, telling him that he can't take their daughter with them. Surprisingly to Tammy, Israel, even being the great dad that he seemed to be,
quote
said
unquote,
okay, that he was going to go to Alaska and that he would leave his daughter behind so that she could be with her mother. He was gone and on his way to Alaska in March of 2007. This can be seen in his travel records when he stopped at the hotel in get out of my country in BC, Canada on the 5th of March in 2007 at a hotel in the Yukon on the 7th and the 8th, and then crossed the Canadian-Alaskan border on the 9th. In 2007, Israel's girlfriend Kimberly moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and asked Israel to move with her. Tammy, still in love, like we said, used her daughter as leverage. So unfortunately, Israel ended up leaving his daughter with Tammy. Yeah, because he sucks. And he was going to go to Alaska with his new girlfriend. He was gone and on his way to Alaska in March of 2007. And this can be seen as his travel records that we will post for our listeners. And he stopped at a hotel in BC, Canada on the 5th. A hotel in Yukon, which is just below Alaska, on the 7th and 8th, and then crossed the Canadian-Alaskan border on the 9th. And that move to Alaska is where we are going to end this episode. And Sierra will kick up next week for part 2. But make sure you come back for next week's episode, as we will get into all of the really big murders that Israel Keyes has become known for. This is just kind of his background. And insane.
Yes.
Fuck. Canadians are people, okay?
Canadians are fucking people. Black people are people. Native American people are people. Everybody is fucking people. White people are not the only people. They are not the only ones that count.
Sorry, correction. White Americans are not the only people.
Exactly. White Americans are not the only people.
So we won't get too crazy for this week, but like we said at the beginning and the middle of this episode, if you want to tell your friends about the show, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, it's the best way you can help us out. And a reminder that Sierra and I are completely indie podcasts. It is just her and I that do all the legwork. So you guys leaving that review is truthfully like the best thing you can do for us.
Yay.
If you have already left us a review, or 2 or 3 or 4, and you don't want to be obnoxious and you have a crazy listener story you want to share, you can do that as well. twistedanduncorked@hotmail.com or at gmail.com. We do technically have both hooked up, and you can send your stories to either. And if you do not have an email account active, you can send it on any Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of those platforms. You can DM us and we'll accept that as well. You can also check out our Patreon, like we said, hours of bonus footage, and we have Urban Legends starting up this month, which is very exciting because that is a new Patreon monthly segment that we are starting. So we are stoked. So if you are a current patron, just be sure to check back on your tiers and see kind of what you're getting, what changes have been made, and we are so excited to give all of that to you.
Yes.
Never be as twisted as Israel Keys. Don't be Israel Keys.
No.
Just don't be Israel Keys. That's the only advice we can give you for this month. And that all humans are humans. Anything else?
That's it.
Sweet. We will see you guys next for Tuesday and part 2 with Sierra for some of the more well-known, crazy, in-depth murders that Israel Keys is known for.
The wrap-up.
And yeah, the wrap-up. And in the meantime, keep it twisted.
Three spooked girls. Three spooked girls.
Hey there, I'm Tara.
And I'm Jessica, and together we co-host the podcast Three Spooked Girls.
If you love the paranormal
Or murder.
join us on Mondays for full-length episodes where we discuss our favorite paranormal stories and true crime cases.
And join us again on Thursdays for our mini-sodes called Stabby Snippets, where we tell you all about true crimes happening in the news.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, wherever the hell else you listen to your pods at. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by using the handle @3spookedgirls.
Come and hang out with us and get your spooky on while we scare the hell out of you.
The three spooked girls.